What's going on, guys? It's Kai back here with another video, and today I want to do my top 10 best teams in the NBA going into the upcoming season, considering the season is literally only like less than a month away at this point. So I'm really excited to see all these new teams, all these new lineups, all these players switching teams. So it's going to be really exciting to see who are the top teams in the NBA. Before I start, I just want to say I appreciate all the love on my last video. If you found me from my last video, or you subscribed, or you liked what you saw, I really appreciate it. With the NBA season started, I'm looking to get out more NBA content, so if you like this video, drop a like, leave a comment, I'd really appreciate it. Tell your friends, and let's get straight into it. Now, when I started this top 10 list, I thought it was going to be easy, but I literally wrote out all the teams that I thought was going to be in my top 10 list, and it was like 16 or 17 teams. So briefly, I want to go over 16 through 11, and that's starting with the Phoenix Suns at 16. Now, I'm sure some Sun fans are not going to be happy to see that. They're down there at number 16, but personally, listen, their best acquisition by far was obviously getting Chris Paul. Chris Paul is going to be 35 this season. But with that being said, he had a really good season last season for the Thunder, an MVP top 5 caliber season on a team that was projected to not even make the playoffs, projected to be one of the bottom like 3 teams in the West, and they made it all the way to like the 5 seed. So props to him, props to the Thunder. But Chris Paul is going to be 35. He's going to be in a new situation. I think pairing him with Devin Booker is actually a really good pairing. And I think DeAndre Ayton is going to learn a lot from Chris Paul and Devin Booker. But I think at the most you're going to get one more really good season out of Chris Paul. Because after this year, he's going to be 36. He's going to be really old at that point in NBA years. I like Jay Crowder's signing. He's a really good 3-and-D guy. Frank Kaminsky's okay, I guess. Cameron Johnson, you hope he can improve, but he's already kind of old for a second-year player. So that's something to keep in mind. But the reality is the West got really good this season. It was already really good. I think the Suns are pushing for an 8 or 9 seed at the best. So that's where I have the Suns at 16. Now at number 15, I honestly had this team not even in my list. But then I realized, you know what, I got to have them in my list. And I'm kind of concerned about this ranking. But at number 15, I have the Golden State Warriors. Now I'm sure some people are really surprised by this, and I know people think the Golden State's going to have a bounce back season and be like a top 3 seed, but I think you need to look at the reality of the situation, and the reality of the situation is Steph Curry is older. He's getting older. He's going to start regressing eventually. I don't think it'll be this season. Granted, he's coming off an injury, but it was a hand injury. It's not a leg injury. It's not something super concerning. But Klay Thompson's going to miss the entire season. He just had a second severe leg injury with the Achilles. I think their best acquisition for sure is Kelly Oubre, who I think is going to fit really well with Steph Curry. But if I'm not mistaken, he's coming off of an injury too. So hopefully he can be as explosive and dynamic on defense as he was in the past for Phoenix. My concern, truthfully, with the Warriors is Andrew Wiggins pairing with the Warriors system. I think Wiggins, he's 24. It's crazy he's only 24. He's been in the league 6 years. But the problem with Wiggins to me is if you're taking a guy like him, number 1, like the Timberwolves did, and they're already off of him only 6 seasons in, there's obviously some concern. I think the concern is that he hasn't gotten that much better at anything. He's been about the same since he was a rookie. So you gotta have a little concern there. Their bigs are gonna be Draymond Green, who, you got to be honest, had a really bad season last season. Mr. Triple Single, he didn't do that much. You got not that great of depth. Eric Pascal, Marquise Chris, Damian Lee, Kevon Looney. I think James Wiseman can be an X factor for this team. If he can come in as a rookie and be really dominant, like they hope he will be at the number 2 pick, then I think that can elevate this team a little bit better. But personally, I have him at number 15 this season, probably finishing as like the 8th seed. Now at number 14, I have the Utah Jazz. And I think the biggest issue the Utah Jazz have is A, that they just signed Donovan Mitchell to that Supermax. Granted, you kind of had to, but the problem is now you have less flexibility. However, they will get off of Mike Conley's huge contract, thankfully, because Mike Conley is starting to regress severely. But you're looking at Mike Conley, Mitchell, Bogdanovich is a real solid piece. They brought back Derek Favors. You got Joe Ingles. Rudy Gobert is going to be an unrestricted free agent, which means they're going to have to make a very big decision on what he's really worth. Yes, he is a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, but you got to look at the reality of the situation, and the reality is the NBA and basketball period is moving away from players like Rudy Gobert. You need to be able to guard perimeter people. You need to be able to be flexible on defense, guard multiple people. Rudy Gobert has been played off the floor, and if you're a Defensive Player of the Year, how can you get played off the floor? You know what I'm saying? So they're going to have to make a decision on him because you know he's going to ask for a bunch of money, and some team is going to offer him a bunch of money. So Utah, I think they're going to finish at like 7 through 9. I think that's where they finished. Now at number 13, I have the NBA champion of 2 years ago, the Toronto Raptors. The Toronto Raptors are a team that has been very good for quite some time after being very bad for quite some time in the early 2000s. So it's good to see them contending and being really good the past few years, but I think the Raptors are going to miss their center position. They did sign Aaron Baines, the GOAT, so maybe they won't miss Marc Gasol and Serge Ibaka because he's a stretch guy too, but I don't think he brings the defense that those two guys brought. Not that I know he doesn't, but I think the biggest flaw that this team has overall is everybody is getting older. You have an older team, and your best player, who is young, in Pascal Siakam, just had a absolute shit the bed performance in the playoffs last season. So that brings some concern. He's still only 25 years old, so hopefully he can bounce back and be just fine. But Kyle Lowry is 33. You re-signed Fred VanVleet to a really big contract, so he's getting paid a lot of money. And then your best players are Chris Boucher, Terrence Davis, Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, Matt Thomas. You know what I mean? So you got less depth than you've ever had. You don't really have the star power that you'd hope a team that contends in the East would have. And overall, I think that they finished like 6-7 seed in the East, which isn't bad, but I don't think they're the title contenders that they have been the past few seasons. Now at number 12, I actually have the Atlanta Hawks. Now I think the Hawks had a top 3 offseason out of the entire NBA. I think they have a logjam at forward, but if we're being honest, that's not the worst thing in the world. I think after seeing last season Trae Young break out, he's going crazy, he's averaging a bunch of points, he can shoot, he can pass, but he cannot play defense. That is very obvious. As of right now in his career, he is not a good defender. So what did they need to do? They needed to bring in a bunch of defenders, and I think they did a pretty good job of that. You bring in Rondo. He's pretty old at this point, past his prime, but he's still a good defender. You bring in a guy like Chris Dunn, who cannot play offense but can play defense really well, so kind of the polar opposite of Trae Young. You still have Clint Capella, who you know what Clint Capella brings. He's only 6'9", so that's, take it for what it is. He's not growing, obviously. Danilo Gallinari, you bring him in. He's 31. He can still bring you offense, stretchability. From what I understand, they're going to bring Gallinari off the bench, which I don't know why you would sign a guy like Gallinari for a bunch of money to bring him off the bench. But you already have John Collins at the 4, who is much younger than him, and I think much better than him overall. Maybe not as good of a shooter, but he can still shoot, and he's a better defender, and he's a better rebounder. So I'm not exactly sure why they bring in Gallinari fit-wise, but if he was the best player they could bring in, you bring him in. The Hawks are trying to get back to the playoffs. They haven't been there in a while. Trae Young is obviously a player that can bring you to the playoffs. Surrounding him with good players is what you need to do. They bring in Bogdanovich, who is a very good player. You have Cam Reddish. You hope he can improve off his rookie season. Kevin Huerter's probably going to be a bench player now. But overall, I think the Hawks are a really solid team. They're probably going to be in the top 5 to 7 range in the East, which is better than what they have been in the past. So I'm not too mad about it. Now at number 11 for my final team outside the top 10, I have the Houston Rockets. the Houston Rockets are one of the wild card teams to me personally in the NBA because I don't know what their team's going to look like at the trade deadline. If the Rockets are 19 and 15 at the trade deadline, do they trade Russell Westbrook or James Harden? I'm not sure. Your best value is probably right now take it off one of those guys. But you're looking at a team with Westbrook, Harden, probably Daniel House, PJ Tucker at the 4, and do you run Christian Wood at the 5? They don't really have much 5 depth as of right now. I don't know if their plan is to still go small ball without Mike D'Antoni and without Daryl Morey, but as of right now, you don't have a lot of options at center. So either putting PJ Tucker back at center is your best option, or putting Christian Wood at center. I hope they don't put PJ Tucker back at center, because my God, pray for PJ Tucker if he has to go through another season at center at like 6'7" or whatever he is. But I think the Rockets are going to be a good regular season team. They always are. They always will be if you have James Harden. And Westbrook was playing really well before the bubble, and there's, rumors he was injured during the bubble, all this crap, blah, 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 whatever. So if they keep this same team, they don't trade their guys, they make it all the way to the end of the season, they're probably looking at like a 5 seed in the West. Who knows if they can go farther than what they have in the past with this team, with this core, but I don't know. I don't think running it back with Westbrook and James Harden one more time isn't a bad idea. I think it's a good idea. You got Christian Wood now. Hopefully he can provide you with something. You still got Eric Gordon. Ben McLemore's okay. They got Kenny Wooten. Maybe he can be an X factor. I watched him at Oregon. He's an athletic freak, so take it for what it is, but I think Houston's the 11th best team in the NBA right now. Now, finally into the top 10, I think all that needed to be said because there are a lot of really good teams in the NBA, but we're finally in the top 10. So at number 10, I have the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, Philadelphia had a disappointing end to the season. I think Philly's biggest issue last season was they weren't exactly sure how they wanted to run their team. They had spacing issues, severe spacing issues. Props to Daryl Morey for getting Al Horford away for only 1 first-round pick. That's pretty solid. You bring in Danny Green. Hopefully he can, be okay. He can actually shoot the basketball again. I think, even going into last offseason, I was really confident that the Sixers were going to be really good. I think most people were. But I think we all realized that the reality of basketball is it's not 2K, and asking Al Horford at the age that he is right now to be your 4, just switching his position like it's 2K and he goes up in overall, it doesn't work like that in real life. He's not quick, really, how he was in the past. He's not a quick big anymore. He can't guard smaller guys. He can't guard as good as he has in the past anymore. And I think their whole hope was, well, if we have Joel Embiid and the only guy that can stop him in the East is Al Horford, let's just sign him to a big-ass contract and he can never guard Joel Embiid again. Unfortunately, what actually happened was he was terrible at the 4. You got Tobias Harris out there who you paid a ton of money to, and he sucked. So now you're looking at a team with Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, great addition. Every team Seth Curry goes to gets better. You got Danny Green probably at the 3, Tobias at the 4, and Joel Embiid at the 5. Bringing in Dwight Howard to be your backup when Joel's tired and ate too much shit before the game and can't play or whatever. He's always doing that shit. But I really need an improvement from Ben Simmons to push this team better than top 10, or number 10, I should say. Because as good as Ben Simmons is, as much as he does bring, he's one of the best defending guards in the entire NBA, if you're saying he's a guard. He's the best rebounder at guard. He's a tremendous passer, but you can't ignore the elephant in the room. He doesn't shoot three-pointers, and the NBA is going and has been going more and more outside shooting. Look at the Rockets last season. How many three-pointers did they shoot a game? Like 60? Ben Simmons, I just don't think he can be a title contending 1 if he doesn't shoot three-pointers. Maybe I'm just being too new school. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I hope the Sixers can do it, but I need an improvement out of Ben Simmons. This is like his 4th or 5th season, I think. I need to start seeing him shoot three-pointers if this team wants to be a legit contender. We also need to see Tobias Harris do something with all that money he's made. I think he's been wasting it on strippers and fucking cars and shit because he ain't been in the gym like he's supposed to be. Need an improvement out of him. And Joel Embiid needs to get more condition, flat out. He needs to improve on that. It's also worth noting that they bring in Doc Rivers, who is without a doubt better than Brett Brown. However, I think the issues Brett Brown had were adjusting when shit was going wrong, and I don't think Doc Rivers does that very well either. So it's either going to be a signing where they drastically get better and it's obvious, or they're going to be like, wow, he just blew a 3-1 lead for us as he did for two other teams already. Why did we sign Doc Rivers? So it's going to be one of those two, but for now, Philly at number 10. Now at number 9, I have the Dallas Mavericks. I think the Dallas Mavericks are once again going to be one of the most fun teams to watch, strictly because of Luka Doncic, who is one of the best players in the NBA already, 2 seasons in. However, I don't think the Dallas Mavericks have a lot of depth. Don't tell anybody I said this, but I think they might be in for a bit of a regression after last season's breakout year. The problem is A, your second best player is injured all the time. Kristaps will miss the beginning of this next season, but he's already on the court again, putting up shots for whatever that's worth. Hopefully he can come back soon. But then your next best player after Luka is probably Josh Richardson, who they traded Seth Curry for, basically swapped shooting guards. He's a better defender, not as good of a spot-up guy. So you have a little more creation with Josh Richardson. But then you have Tim Hardaway at the 3 and Willie Cauley-Stein at the 5. Not a lot of bench depth. I think the problem with Dallas is, A, they don't have a ton of defense out there. And with Kristaps out, you're starting Maxi Kleber. So you're really hoping Luka can just, carry the team while Kristaps is hurt. And B, you're hoping that your defense isn't super bad and your offense can just carry you. However, most teams that are really good at offense and bad at defense get really high regular season wins and fail in the playoffs because defense always conquers in the playoffs. And I think that's going to be Dallas' biggest issue. I don't think Luka's going to have a regression year. A lot of people do in their third season after a breakout year. I think Luka's just different, but I don't think they have a lot of depth, and I think that could hurt them in the season, leaving them at number 9. Now at number 8, I have the defending Eastern Conference champions, Miami Heat. I think the Heat have a very good and deep team. I think the biggest issue the Miami Heat have is, A, you just signed Goran Dragic, you re-signed him. He had a very good season last year. I was very surprised to see how well he did as he's getting older at this point. One of my earliest basketball memories is watching Goran Dragic score like 35 against the Warriors when he played for Phoenix. I think at this point, Goran Dragic is a little past his prime. It's concerning that Kendrick Nunn didn't do very well in the playoffs last season as Goran Dragic kind of took over. He was their best player in the playoffs up until the finals when he tore his plantar fasciitis. And that's the other concern. He's coming off of a foot injury. So I don't know if he's going to be the same, but they re-signed him. Duncan Robinson is obviously one of the best shooters in the NBA. Tyler Hero, I think he might be in for a bit of a wake-up call in the NBA. I think Tyler Hero is a dog, but I think teams are going to start pressing the hell out of him at the three-point line and making him beat you on the drive. He can do that. I've seen him do that. He's got a little creation, but I hope he's working on his handle in the offseason because he's not going to get as many open shots as he did this year as a bit of a surprise player. Jimmy Butler is obviously a spectacular player. He's also getting a little older at this point, but I'm not concerned about what Jimmy Butler's going to bring. He's a dog. Andre Iguodala is washed. Let's be honest. He's your backup 3. He is washed. 100% washed. Bam Adebayo, you just maxed him out, so you can't get away with paying him $6 million anymore. You just paid him. Very well worth it. Bam Adebayo is one of the best young bigs in the NBA. And then you're looking at Myers Leonard at the center. So I don't know. I think the Heat are a very good and very deep team. However, I think they're in for a bit of a regression year compared to last season when they made the finals, and a bit of a strange season with COVID. But I think they're very good, and I think the biggest issue down the line for them next season is I think teams are going to lock in a little bit more. I think they're going to catch on to what they did this past season. I think they're going to force players like Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero to do what they're uncomfortable with. They're going to make them play a little more defense. But overall, I think they finished a top 4 seed, which isn't bad, but I have Miami at number 8. Now, number 7, and I think this is a very fair rating based off of what they did in the playoffs last season. I have the Los Angeles Clippers. Now, there's no denying the fact that you have Kawhi Leonard, the fact that you have Paul George, despite him consistently playing like shit in the playoffs. But the biggest issue is you don't really have a playmaker. Maybe if they trade for Derrick Rose, I would move them up a little bit. But Patrick Beverley really isn't that great of a player. Plays defense, hit an open 3. That's really about it. He's not even that much of a playmaker as a point guard. They're looking to get off of Lou Williams in hope to recharge their attitude or some shit I read, which is just crazy considering that they have all these attitude problems. When you have Kawhi Leonard, that's not really what I would think as the LA Clippers. But after last season, it makes sense, man. They straight up choked in the playoffs. You bring in Luke Kennard, who is a solid piece. He's pretty comparable to Landry Shamet. He's really a better shooter, but he's one of the dead last worst defenders in the NBA, and that's fine when you have Paul George and Kawhi, so that's not a big deal, but take that for what it is. You bring back Morris, who's solid. He's solid. And then one of their bigger signings was Serge Ibaka. I think Ibaka brings a lot of what their issues were last season when they had Harrell, and he's kind of getting played out the playoffs because he doesn't provide that much, truthfully. He's not that great on offense. He's kind of small. He's pretty small for a big, Montrezl Harrell. So you got Zubac off the bench. They have Joakim Noah. But Ibaka's going to provide a lot for them, I think. I think the Clippers are going to be really good next season in the regular season. The biggest concern is, you don't have Doc Rivers anymore. Hopefully that helps, all your locker room issues. Hopefully that was one of the biggest problems for them, and that helps them. However, from what I understand, Kawhi Leonard's biggest thing from coming to the Clippers was he wanted to play for Doc Rivers. So if you lose Kawhi next offseason, you lose Paul George, you're pretty much fucked, is what they are. If this season doesn't go well for the Clippers, they are so fucked because they have no picks. They're going to have no Kawhi, no Paul George if they leave. You're going to have a bunch of older players, no picks. They're going to be really in a bad spot if they don't do anything this season. But with their current roster, you can't deny Kawhi Leonard. You can't deny Paul George in the regular season anyway. You got to imagine eventually he's going to bounce back and have a good playoff series. So I have the Clippers at number 7. Now at number 6, if you haven't noticed already, you haven't heard my team. But here we are, the Portland Trailblazers at number 6, 6th best team in the NBA, in my opinion. And if you want to say there's some bias there, sure. But if we're being as unbiased as possible, if we're just looking at rosters, we're looking at fit and potential for the team, I think the Blazers have a really good team compared to what they've had in the past. And compared to how they've done in the past with that roster construction compared to this season's roster, I think we're going to be the number 3 seed in the West. We're going to be a lot different than what a lot of teams have come accustomed to assuming what's going to happen when they play us, because you got to look at it like this. The Blazers are going to start Dame, CJ, obviously. They're probably going to start Robert Covington at the 4 and Derrick Jones at the 3. Those are 2 very solid defenders compared to last season, which isn't even close to comparable when we're starting Hazonia and a combination of Wenyen Gabriel, Anthony Tolliver, and Kent Bazemore throughout the season due to injuries and lack of depth. And then we got Nurkic at the center, right? So you got a full season of Nurkic this season. He's going to be healthy. You got Carmelo coming off the bench. You got Rocco. You got Derek Jones. You got Rodney Hood for bench depth. You got Zach Collins for bench depth. Gary Trent was one of the best players in the entire bubble this last season. He's probably going to come off the bench and provide 12 to 15 points. And then you got Anthony Simons, who truthfully hasn't been spectacular. Hopefully he can make a jump, but he's still super young. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of unfair to judge a guy and say he's a bust or he's not very good when dude's literally like 21 or 22 years old. So you also have Enes Kanter off the bench. So that's a really solid squad. There's a lot of depth there. You know what Dame and CJ are going to bring. They're in the middle of their prime right now. Carmelo's probably going to come off the bench. I think Carmelo's going to be a dark horse for Sixth Man of the Year this season. I think that's going to be really interesting because off the bench, he's going to get a majority of the looks for him. You're going to have Simons creating. You're going to have Gary Trent getting open three-pointers, Rodney Hood getting open three-pointers, Zach Collins, Enes Kanter cleaning up the glass when everyone else is sitting on the bench. I think the Blazers are in for a really good season, and they're the number 6 team on my list. Now at number 5, I have the Denver Nuggets. Now the Denver Nuggets are coming off of a really good postseason run in the bubble. They made it to the Western Conference Finals, lost to the Lakers, eventual champions. But I think the thing that the Denver Nuggets have to look forward to is that their team as a whole is really young. Yeah, you have Paul Millsap. You bring him back to, provide some stability. You know what he brings in. But more importantly, you have guys like Bol, Michael Porter Jr., who was a projected top pick before he broke his back, and it doesn't look like it's bothering him at this point. So you have him still coming into his own. You have Jokic, the best center in the NBA in my eyes. Murray was balling in the playoffs. I think the Nuggets are going to have a really good season. They've had really solid seasons for the past few years, but I think what's going to push this team over the top is the continuity in a Western Conference that a lot of teams switched up key players. A lot of teams added new guys that may take some time to adjust, among other COVID things and other regulations. This team has been together. This core has been together. You're probably going to start Murray, Gary Harris, who wasn't that great last season, but he's a defender. Hopefully he can bounce back on his percentages a little bit. You're either going to start Will Barton or Michael Porter at the 3. If you're talking long term, Michael Porter is the option, but Will Barton didn't play in the bubble, and he's a really solid player. And you got Millsap, and you got Jokic, the best center in the NBA. So I think the team's really solid. I think it's got potential to continue to grow and become an even better team. But for right now, I got Denver at number 5. I think they're going to be around the 3 seed, potentially the 2 seed in the West. Now at number 4, I have the Milwaukee Bucks. The Bucks were the 1 seed last season and the season before that. They've had tremendous regular season success. But my biggest concern is that we've seen this and we've seen how it ends in the playoffs. The spacing issues, the things that are holding Giannis back currently with his game. He's got to improve his mid-range area. He's got to get better as an overall shooter, an overall creator. I also think Budenholzer has held them back to a degree. I don't think he's a spectacular coach. But what I think the Bucks' biggest issue this season is, A, they have little to zero depth. Your best backup is probably Bobby Portis, who is solid, but other than that, you're looking at DJ Wilson, Jordan Nwora, who's going to be a rookie, Bryn Forbes, and DJ Augustine. Those are, they're all okay. That's not a bad backup lineup, but you traded a king's ransom for Jrue Holiday. Jrue Holiday's a good player, and right now your biggest focus in the offseason was making sure Giannis didn't want to leave. So you kind of had to make that move. I don't blame them. But you way overpaid for Jrue Holiday. That's for sure. But if you're worried about right now, this team is solid. They're going to be really good defensively. They might be the number 1 defensive team in the NBA. And I think Jrue Holiday is going to help them a lot right now. But he's already pretty old at this point. And if I'm the Milwaukee Bucks owner, I'm looking towards next year. And I'm kind of concerned about Giannis leaving. Because if he leaves, your team's looking kind of bad with a bunch of older players and overall not that much aside from Giannis. But I think they're going to finish the 3 seed, maybe the 2 seed, but overall I have the Bucks at number 4. Now, at the number 3 team in the NBA, I have the Boston Celtics. I think the Boston Celtics are in for a breakout season. I think this year they're probably going to win close to 60 games. That's going to be kind of a bold prediction, I think, but you're looking at a starting lineup of Kemba, Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, obviously, and they bring in Tristan Thompson, who's probably going to be their starting center. Tristan Thompson isn't spectacular, but he's an improvement over Daniel Tice and Robert Williams, in my opinion. Then you have Jeff Teague off the bench. He's a solid point guard option if Kemba gets hurt. He's had some injury concerns in the past. You got Romeo Langford, who is a very young player, kind of improving. Semi Ojeleye, and Grant Williams and Robert Williams. I think the Celtics are going to have a very, very good season. I think they're going to be one of the top offenses and top defenses, but these guys got to stay healthy. Kemba Walker needs to become Charlotte Kemba Walker in order for this team to make a push to the finals. I think overall they have a very good roster and they're very well coached. They lose Gordon Hayward, but Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum is going to be your team's future for the next 10 years at least in Danny Ainge's eyes. So you hope to see an improvement out of those two, and that's going to help lead you to a number 1 or maybe number 2 seed. But for right now, I got the Boston Celtics at number 3. Now, at the number 2 team in the NBA and the Eastern Conference's number 1 seed in my eyes is the Brooklyn Nets. Brooklyn is going to be a very, very fun team to watch, regardless if they are as good as I think they are, because you got Kyrie Irving, you got Kevin Durant. The Brooklyn Nets are in a very interesting situation because I don't think how their team looks right now is how their team's going to look by the end of the season, because you still have Karis LeVert and Spencer Dinwiddie. You don't necessarily need Spencer Dinwiddie if you have Kyrie Irving. It would be great to have a guy like that off the bench, but I don't think the Nets are looking to do that, especially when you have Taurean Prince and Jeff Green, your best options at the 4. So they might look to improve that. And you also have Jared Allen and DeAndre Jordan at the center, and you have Nicholas Claxton. So you're probably going to move off of one of those guys, most likely Jared Allen. He's younger. He's going to have more value. I think Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving both are big fans of DeAndre Jordan. So you're probably looking at Kyrie, Karis LeVert, Kevin Durant, DeAndre Jordan, and right now, Taurean Prince. That team is very, very good on offense. They're going to be dangerous. Obviously, it's going to be a question of how good Kevin Durant comes off of a very serious injury. But if Kevin Durant is any fraction of what he's been his entire career, this Brooklyn Nets team is going to be dangerous. The biggest issue I see the Nets having is that there's going to be a ton of egos in the locker room. Not only that, but you have a guy like Steve Nash coming in to coach his first team with all these guys. It could be dangerous, it could be a problem, but overall I think they have enough talent and they're going to overcome all of that. I see them as the number 1 team in the East and the number 2 team overall in the NBA. Now, at the number 1 team in the NBA this next season, if you haven't already noticed, I have the defending champion Los Angeles Lakers at number 1. I think the Lakers had a really good offseason for the position that they were coming off the championship. I didn't think they had that much flexibility. They obviously didn't have that much draft capital, but they found a way to get better as a team. They get Schroeder. It's a really good point guard. He maybe start, maybe come off the bench, depending on if they want LeBron to play the 1 or the 3. If they start him, it's going to be Schroeder, Wesley Matthews, LeBron, Anthony Davis, and either Marc Gasol or Montrezl Harrell. But then I think the thing that the Lakers have this season that they didn't necessarily have last season was they have some solid bench options. You still have Kuzma as of right now. You have Dennis Schroeder if he comes off the bench. You have KCP. You have Marc Gasol or Montrezl Harrell, depending on who starts. I think this team is pretty solid. I think the biggest issues going into the season is going to be shooting. Yes, you bring in Wesley Matthews, who's a good shooter and a good defender, but outside of that, you're looking at Morris to hit threes, hoping KCP can hit threes, hoping Kuzma can hit threes, LeBron, Caruso. Like, it's not crazy depth, but when you have a team with LeBron and Anthony Davis, and you get in Montrezl Harrell and you get in Schroeder, that team's going to be contending, obviously, and I think they're going to finish the 1 seed. However, I wouldn't be surprised if they dropped a few more games this season and they finished 2, maybe 3 at the worst. But overall, I got the Lakers at number 1. If you made it this far into the video, you obviously liked something you saw, so I'd appreciate a like, a comment, subscription. It's free. I just want to say I greatly appreciate everyone that's watched my videos recently, and I hope everyone has a blessed day, and I'll see you guys in the next video.